Among longtime fans, Transformers Prime is held in pretty high esteem. It takes a lot of the familiar elements from Transformers Generation 1 as well as the Marvel Comics and readapts them for the modern age. Transformers Prime joins Beast Wars and Transformers Animated as reinventions of the franchise that are held in high esteem and are beloved by fans all over. While I do like Transformers Prime, its plot, aesthetics, and characterization, I do feel like it loses quite a bit of momentum midway through the series and ends on a very weak note. The Darkness Rising 5-part pilot, as well as a lot of the character introductions in Season 1, are really strong and overshadow the rest of the series. Now, Transformers Prime took a lot of familiar elements from Generation 1 and redefined them with grounded and mature writing, and to this effect, a lot of characterization changed because of this. RC is a much more grizzled character compared to her G1 counterpart, and one of the most notable changes comes in the Decepticon communications officer, Soundwave. If you're unfamiliar with Transformers Prime, this figure is almost unrecognizable as Soundwave. It has some very basic elements that are familiar, most notably the head sculpt, but outside of that, it's a complete diametric opposite from Generation 1. Taking a look at Soundwave when compared to his G1 counterpart, we can see that Transformers Prime took a complete opposite approach to his character design. No longer is he the bulky and blocky bot, instead he's incredibly slender and sleek. The only design elements that are really carried over from Generation 1 are the crown-like head crest and the fact that he's blue. Outside of that, this really is a very deconstructed Soundwave, the base elements and almost nothing else. Now, while changing these design elements from Soundwave sounds like blasphemy today, we gotta remember Transformers Prime came hot off the heels of not only the 2007 Michael Bay movie, but its highly successful, if terrible, sequel, Transformers Revenge of the Fallen, which did debut a live-action Soundwave. Transformers Prime took a lot of design elements from the live-action movie, as well as some familiar elements from Generation 1. And we can see this in the concept art, which is drastically different from the final product. We can see that this concept art is based heavily on the Revenge of the Fallen satellite Soundwave, and while some design cues are kept for the final product, I'm glad they moved away from this gray monstrosity. The final look for Transformers Prime Soundwave reminds me quite a bit of the 2005 Battlestar Galactica Cylon redesign, taking the bulky and stocky Cylon Centurions from the 70s and reinventing them as these creepy, willowy, and lanky robots that look extremely dangerous. Now, Soundwave has very odd proportions in robot mode, with the very long, flat arms, as well as these digidegrade legs, harkening back to the Transformers movie designs. Despite his odd physique, he does have a pretty solid level of articulation, though this toy came out almost 15 years ago, so it's not up to modern standards. Now, seeing as this is Soundwave, he does of course come with a loyal companion. Rather than Ravage, Rumble, or Frenzy, he does get the classic Laserbeak. Now, if you thought Soundwave was deconstructed to his base elements, Laserbeak is extremely, extremely basic, being this little drone with origami wings. It's almost unrecognizable as Laserbeak and kind of fits a tiny bit better as Ratbat, if you ask me. Now, seeing as this redesign is all about stealth and espionage, it really does fit, even though I would love something much more characterful akin to the original Generation 1 look. Moving into Soundwave's alternate mode, this has always been one of the biggest problems for the character. Whenever reimagining him, we have to take into account Soundwave was originally a micro-cassette recorder, which is very, very antiquated by today's standards. In the live-action movies, Soundwave was introduced as a satellite, and while somewhat uninteresting, it does suit his espionage and communications role. In Transformers Prime, Soundwave has been reimagined as an unmanned drone, which does fit him in this modern and contemporary age as drones are used for surveillance and stealth missions. While the drone is an interesting take on Soundwave, I can't help but feel that as an alternate mode, it's a little weak. Drones aren't the most imposing or impressive of aircraft in my opinion. If I was to redesign Soundwave, I'd want him to be some sort of stealth jet, like a flying wing bomber, or, if we want to go old school, an SR-71 Blackbird. It adds to a creepy dimension that Transformers Prime Soundwave has. He is always observing from the shadows, and keeping tabs on not only the Autobots, but the Decepticons, as they are full of usurpers and those who would seek to undo Megatron. And Soundwave, no matter the continuity, is always loyal. Even though I keep saying Transformers Prime Soundwave, technically speaking, this is a representation of Soundwave from the aligned continuity. The Aligned continuity was a Hasbro pet project started in the early to mid 2010s to make one united and diegetically cohesive continuity family. This would be represented in multiple comic books, animated series including Transformers Prime, Rescue Bots, Robots in Disguise, as well as the War for Cybertron video games. The issue is, all of these are actually very incongruous and contradictory.
It's obvious that everyone's trying to cover their own ass. Wheeljack, I'm holding you responsible for this project.
In direct opposition to the bold Frontlines field commander of Generation 1, Transformers Prime Soundwave is instead a silent sentinel, ever watchful and loyal to Megatron. The silent part has to be emphasized. If I remember correctly, this version of Soundwave has in fact taken a vow of silence to show his resolution and steadfast determination to the Decepticon cause. In my opinion, this characterization choice is a little bit of a mixed bag. On one hand, you have Soundwave as the silent, stoic monolith, always watching and always observing, contrasting really well with the talkative and charismatic Starscream and Knockout. On the other hand, despite his massive and imposing frame and importance to the Decepticon hierarchy, he is easily overshadowed by a lot of the other characters. Starscream, Knockout, Dreadwing, even Skyquake all tend to take the spotlight. This isn't to say that Soundwave doesn't have any notable moments in the show. He does. The first one that springs to mind is when Soundwave very quickly equalizes Arachnid when she gets a little too big for her britches and tries to usurp command of the Decepticons in Megatron's absence. The issue is, a lot of these moments are very few and far between, and most of the time, Soundwave is relegated to the background, and this isn't some obscure way to show that he is the master of whispers lurking in the shadows. This is the writers kind of forget to do something with Soundwave. And that's one of my major problems with Transformers Prime in general. I do like it, I like the story beats and the characterizations, but the issue is the writers will bring up something interesting and something notable, and then just lose momentum with it. They'll just kind of trail off and forget it and either pick it back up later or just establish something different entirely. Either way, there's just a lot of dead air. So while I do like this version of Soundwave, and I think it has a lot of potential to be a very interesting reinterpretation of the character, and it does have a pretty cool and eye-catching toy, my issues with him can be summed up in a quote from the 1986 Transformers movie. "He's an uncharismatic bore."